right, good morning, everybody. This is my very first Twitter space that I'm doing, so welcome and bear with me. Today's topic is going to be, do men know when they're being abused? Now, this is something that I'm very passionate about myself because I noticed that there's quite a difference in the dialogue and the rhetoric when we're talking about abuse, any forms, whether it's psychological, emotional, physical, sexual. And there's a huge difference when we're talking about male perpetrators or female perpetrators. Um, One of the biggest differences that I noticed, when we're coming to, we'll look at slapping, for example. If a guy were to come to you and say, oh, I just slapped my girlfriend, well, that's an issue. That's not very, I'd call the police on him. Hello, are you okay? Um, but a girl comes to you and says, oh, I slapped my boyfriend, and, she's probably going to get a high five, a good job, something along the lines, right? We've kind of formulated it into this form of empowerment, which is quite confusing. As well as when we're talking about sexual abuse, there's a huge difference there. I, as a girl, we often hear that every girl we know has been sexually harassed or sexually abused. And that rings true for me. However, every guy that I know has also experienced sexual abuse or some form of sexual harassment, but the rhetoric, even when they're disclosing their trauma, is so different. For example, it's often met with humor. A guy will say, oh, yeah, I was 11 and this 16-year-old was really trying to diddle me. And there'll be like this humor, this laughter that comes with it. But a girl says the same thing and like there's no humor. In fact, if she was laughing, we'd be like, oh my gosh, uncomfortable, right? So I'm just going to leave it open for anybody to add any thoughts if you guys wish. And I'm going to go make my daughter a peanut butter sandwich. I will be listening, so feel free to hit your mic on button and add any thoughts you have. Don't be shy. It's okay. There's a button on your bottom left screen. It says mic on if you have any thoughts. And if you don't and you just want to wait a second, that's okay too. Okay, I'm back. I guess everybody's feeling a little bit shy today. That's okay. Hopefully, somebody will ding in with some input. A big question that I typically get asked, as a men's rights advocate and as somebody who's very passionate about the topic of male victims of abuse, one thing that I get asked quite often is, what's the reason that so many men don't know why they're being abused? And, the simplest answer for me would probably go back to that rhetoric, right? We don't really leave a whole lot of space in society for men to be victims. And even that word alone, the word victim, it has this tone of weakness to it. But what I try to let people remember is that, you can be a victim, but you don't have to victimize yourself. There's a very big difference. You can experience something at which you were a victim, but you can also choose to take that and do something better with it. You can choose to Um, you can choose to do anything you want with it. Um, so there's a big difference there. And when it comes to, masculinity, vulnerability and things like that don't really fit into that description when it comes to society. Being a victim, like I said, vulnerability, emotional, those things just don't fit into society's box on what they deem masculine and acceptable. And at the end of the day, this is so damaging because there's lots of positions of power where men can find themselves at the opposite end of. For example, I shared a video of, Steve Harvey talking about when he was 11 and this 16-year-old girl who was beating up him and all the other kids in the community, the boys. She grabbed him off his bike, threw him up against the garage, and was like, "You're going to kiss me," and really aggressively kissed him. And he said that it bothered him. It said he fucked him up. And that girl came on his show and called him out. And everybody was just laughing hysterically. And they were I understand that it's hard to decipher the difference when it's a comedian like Steve Harvey, but at the end of the day, no matter how you want to look at it, if it was a woman sitting up there saying I was 11 years old and this 16-year-old boy who's beating up all the girls, blah, 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 we'd be like, oh my gosh, you're a victim. But because, Steve Harvey is Steve Harvey and people didn't view that story in the position of him being a little boy, they chose to view him as a full grown man. There wasn't that same understanding there. And there was no understanding that there is a position of power. That was a position of power. She was older than him, she was bigger than him, she was physically aggressive with him. Um, and these are conversations that I feel like we need to continue to have and let men know that, first of all, masculinity is self defined. I'm a woman. I am not going to sit here and tell men what it means to be masculine. That's completely not up to me. Um, but what I do see as an observer is that people are tying masculinity into who they are in such a strong way that they're forgetting to define it themselves. And they're really holding on to those old school values of what it means to be a man, which is you provide and you pull your socks up and you say nothing. And, the suicide rate is as high as it is for men for a reason. And it's because what we're doing as a society isn't working. It's very clear that something is not working here. Um, and so I think first things first is we need to let men know that, you know, vulnerability is not weakness. It's not feminine, and femininity is not weakness either. It's okay to say, oh my gosh, my girlfriend may be half my size, but when she slaps me in the face, sure, it doesn't really hurt me, but it fucking hurts emotionally. And that is abuse. And it's okay to acknowledge that. That doesn't make you any less masculine. So I'm just going to give you guys a second if anybody wants to hit their speaker button and add any thoughts into this. I'll give you the chance to do so before I get into some examples of abuse and how you can tell if you are in an abusive relationship.
Hi. I just want to say, first of all, it's really an honor and pleasure to be on the mic with you in the space. I've been following you for a while, saw you were holding this, and I had to jump in. I think one of the things in terms of men recognizing when we're being abused that is very often overlooked is being pressured into sex as adults. Because we're conditioned over the course of our lives to accept sex. It's like we're supposed to want it. And so if it comes to us, there is literally a pressure from the world and an expectation that we're going to accept, we're going to be grateful for it being offered, or in this case, imposed. And if we say no and push away, then suddenly either we're weak or we're weird, or there's got to be something wrong with us. There's got to be something inherently wrong with the man if he's turning down sex. Maybe there's been traumatic experiences in his life. Maybe he's tired and doesn't feel like it. The first partner I ever had, like, I stopped sleeping with her because she was pushing me when I was exhausted. Like, I was too damn tired. And I still went through with it because I was young and I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. But end of the day, she went home and I ended up sleeping on the couch and then washing my sheets the next morning because I felt dirty and used. And that's something that I know a lot of men go through. And just in terms of examples of abuse and men needing the space to recognize and acknowledge that coercion and the archetype of being the hungry man, being the predator, being the aggressor is literally something that shuts down our ability to not only express emotion in the moment, but to even express when we do not want to have affection and we do not want to have that connection.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. My goodness, that was very, very insightful and very articulate as well. Thank you for sharing, and I am really sorry that you went through that. You make so many good points. I say it all the time. We always talk about how we sexualize young girls, but we don't necessarily talk about how we sexualize young boys. For example, my late best friend, may he rest in peace, but he has a little baby boy who is the cutest thing ever. And when he was over hanging out with me and my female best friend, he would sit in between us, this little cute baby, and his dad would be like, "Oh, look at you, you ladies man. You're just drawn to the pretty ladies." And, there's like this drummed up expectation right from little that this is your goal is to get girls, and this is what makes you powerful and admirable. And on a side note to that, it's interesting because when men grow up and they are full grown men and they're out getting lots of ladies, that's something that's frowned upon. So there is this expectation that's placed on guys because society has just tricked ourselves into thinking that guys are always like willing and wanting, and consent doesn't matter because they're always consenting, because as a woman I'm doing him a favor. I'm not sure if you saw on Facebook or YouTube the video that I posted just yesterday of this new trend. It's called Pizza Dare, and it's where girls order pizza and open the door partially or stark naked to pizza delivery guys, sometimes minors, and they just get their pizza that way. And I couldn't even imagine going delivering my pizza and seeing some like purple-headed yogurt slinger in my face. Like, what is this? Oh my gosh, like he would be put in jail, um sex offender registry. There would be a lawsuit. I would be suing my company. like you know but there's no thought of that. And somebody commented on their subreddit. They said, as somebody who is a man and who years ago woke up to a girl I didn't know having sex with me, this would have triggered me and triggered a really negative response out of me. And so it's interesting because as women we talk very loudly about how men don't really understand boundaries and consent. And I do agree to some level because I think that our conversations about consent are so minimal. But we never, at the same time, like we're not even talking to our daughters about consent. We're not even talking to them about, boundaries and to respect men's bodies just as much as our own. And so when we do this, we build this space for not only men to be victimized, but for women to and predators, like not women, sorry, because women are not the ones doing this, it's predators. So for these predators to get away with it. And then you have guys who say things like, oh, I wish somebody would open the door naked, or, I wish my babysitter molested me. And, you don't know who's seeing that comment. You don't know who's seeing these videos, who now think to themselves, well, oh shit, am I wrong for feeling this way? Well, fuck, if I shouldn't be violated, does this mean it's not violating if I crawl into a girl's bed and start touching her without consent? You know what I mean? It's a very dangerous rhetoric. So, yeah, I'm just going to let anybody else jump in and just go check on my little kidling really quick.
Well, I'll jump on the mic since we don't have anyone else up here. Definitely got to agree with you, Chloe, because when there's not just rhetoric, social standards that apply to men and women, and the way that that is expressed within a legal format. Statistically speaking, only about 25 to 30% of reported sex crimes where there is a female offender actually go through to prosecution. You're looking at the male side, it's more like 80. Difference when there's consideration of the harm done. Someone is being violated simply because of being male. That in and of itself invalidates the experience of trauma within the eyes of most societies. I can't even say it's just American society because it seems to be something that spreads across cultures globally. And one of the things that I definitely think is necessary in terms of shifting this conversation is bringing more of an understanding to the full spectrum of emotion and experience that men have, because we've been taught that the only acceptable emotions are aggression and arousal, whether it's sports, whether it's business, personal relationships. We basically have aggression and arousal as our two modes of acceptable. And aggression can be joking, be exercising, but it still comes through as aggression in one form or another. And as we look at how society has changed over the last several decades, one thing that I find very interesting, especially being a cisgender, mostly heterosexual man that was raised by lesbians, I see that there's been a huge shift in the way that power operates in the world. Men still hold the most political power, but when it comes to being able to make an accusation, when it comes to being able to break someone down, destroy someone's world, that power lies in the hands of women, 100% and completely. And it's a very interesting juxtaposition where women have actually taken over, in many ways, some of the negative elements of toxic masculinity, of imposing force, imposing one's will, both in terms of individual relationships and in terms of shaping social perceptions. And I would love to see a dialogue start to emerge where we really have the true essence of feminism as it was developed in the beginning: equality. Not women trying to be as hard as men, as aggressive as men, as merciless as men, but all people being able to simply love, respect, and value one another for our inherent worth as human beings. And that's something that we all got to get over a lot of trauma to be able to do.
Yeah, I agree with you a lot. There's a lot of stuff that you said there that I agree with, especially with uh, young boys being at risk. Like the way that feminism has shifted, and it's kind of that whole the grass is greener on the other side, right? I hear people say a lot, you know women, or feminism is encouraging women to be like men. You know what I mean? And to me, that's never really made a whole lot of sense, because for me, I don't have a specific definition of like men. What does it mean to be man? Because then it's like, I'm shoving them in a box. But at the same time, um, there's nothing. I feel like if women, I feel like what women are not seeing is that, like I said, the grass is greener on the other side thing. They're saying, well, men are, they're praised for being, loud, for being, abrasive's not the word, but like assertive. You know what I mean? And so I think that there's like a miscommunication about, women want to be men. What it really is that they're trying to shift and find a way where they fit, so that they can be treated like kind of the same. And that's something that I understand in aspects of, I grew up around a lot of guys, but I also grew up a street kid, getting into a lot of trouble. And as a woman who was surrounded by a lot of men in a pretty criminally inclined world, I had to change the way that I spoke, the way that I dressed, and the way that I acted, just to be accepted and respected. Because if I was walking around with like TNA pants and, my makeup and lashes done to the nines, and, there's no way that I would have gotten the respect that I had. And that's unfortunate, because it wouldn't have made my personality any differently, but I did have to kind of morph myself into, wearing more androgynous clothes, not really wearing makeup, just doing these things where it wasn't so, my femininity wasn't so pronounced. And that's actually why I have all of my tattoos, which most of them I got as a minor. And it's because I just didn't want people to see a pretty face, and I wanted to be taken seriously. It may have not been the best way to go about it, but that was my position. So I think it's not so much that women are like wanting to be men, it's that they just want to be accepted on that level. But with that being said, women also need to understand what it means to be a man. And that's not something that we can understand unless we listen, because we're not men. We don't know what it's like to walk around and have people assume that you're guilty. We don't know what it's like to walk beside our children and have people think that you're a kidnapper. Like, we don't share these same experiences. And so I think if men and women were just to talk to each other, rather than it being this whole like competition, i think I think we could get to like a much better place as a society. And men as well, I hear men saying things like, well, you know emotions are, that's feminine. And it's like, well, if that's what you believe based off of what society's told you, that's fair. But if you also respect and value women as equals, well, what's wrong with that? You know what I mean? But because society has driven such a nail into this difference between men and women, there's a huge misunderstanding, when it comes to how men feel emotions, how they think about their sex drive, as well as, how they are as victims. Most people are completely unaware that from ages, I believe it's 3 to 5 or 5 to 7, boys are at a much higher risk of being molested, um, than girls are. We even look at the data for the domestic violence rate. They say that the domestic violence rate is like, what were they saying, 70-20? That is completely false. It has been unequivocally proven that domestic violence rates are 50-50. So women are just as, if not more, violent as men. So it's just very interesting that I think men and women have a very strong misunderstanding of what it means to be feminine and masculine. And I think instead of trying to compete with each other and just listen to each other, I think we could all like live in this balanced space. But I see a few people requesting, and my daughter is calling me, so I'll turn off my mic and allow these people to join.
Looking forward to having these brothers on the mic. I wanted to jump in real quick and just clarify a little. I don't think women are trying to be like men. I think that there's actually a strange social construct that's been created that, like you said, even in your own experience, there was the necessity to adopt all of these traits, to take on the tattoos, to take on a rough attitude, to do various things in order to be protected within your own world. And that same reality goes for the academic world, the business world, the sports world. It's almost that there's an imposition to take on masculine traits, whether one wants them or not, to be accepted. And I think that in and of itself is exceptionally destructive because it focuses on all of the most aggressive and competitive elements of masculinity instead of bringing in the nurturer, the guardian, the caring side, and really both everyone being able to express and explore the truth of their own experience and gender is one of the most important things to be able to get past these. And I'll go on mute because we got Skull and Gerald.
Go ahead, Skull.
You guys hear me?
Yes, I can. And thank you for that insight.
Um, we're talking about when guys are abused as younger boys. Um, it translates very roughly to when they're adults. Um, I myself was I'm not really, that good looking. So uh when I would try to approach girls, um it didn't go very well. Oftentimes just standing there in line, at lunch and trying to get your food. My glasses were broken sometimes. So I'd be trying to squint and see the menu, and then I'd get I'd get this there'd be this misunderstanding that I'd be staring at someone, and there'd be like this weird tension. I even got yelled at once. But that that kind of fucks with you a little bit, because you're supposed to be born with like this amount of like base confidence as a guy. Like there's just like, I don't know, like maybe it's like a game stat. Like you're born with like 10 confidence, and then it builds as you get older. That that shit kind of drops you down to zero sometimes, especially when it happens a lot like it did with me. Uh, but you don't really have that confidence when you get older, because if no one's there to like, you know, build you up like most girls have girlfriends and all that, you don't if you don't have many friends that are like, yeah, don't worry about what they're doing, all that shit doesn't really come back, and it gets harder and harder because you're supposed to be able to approach, you're supposed to have that game, you're supposed to have that confidence. But if you don't have that confidence, then you're low key fucked. But and then it's like the worst time for it to happen, especially in these times, because like you guys said, women are, under some kind of pressure to become more aggressive, and they end up, attacking the wrong people. Like Chloe often says, you're supposed to attack the issue, not the gender. Um, shit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you.
that's all I got.
Thanks a lot for sharing. I thought that was really insightful. There's two other people here that want to get added into, so I just want to say this really quickly. It can be like probably the most disheartening thing oh, I think someone's mic's on. Oh, there you go. It can be the most, like it can be really dehumanizing, I could imagine, as a man to, just kind of walk through society, especially if you've been victimized by women, and like have women target you as just like this guilty monster specifically because you have a Peter. That just doesn't make any sense to me. And I could imagine the amount of like hurt and confusion that you would walk around with, because I feel a sense of it in the regards of, it's really not, like, you're really not seen as a victim if your perpetrator is a woman, and that's legal. That's under the legal definition of abuse in the UK, that you are not a victim if your perpetrator is a woman. It doesn't matter if you're a woman being sexually assaulted, or sorry, it was rape. It was the definition of rape. It doesn't matter. Like, you cannot be raped by a woman under the legal definition in the UK law. And as somebody myself, I live in Canada, but it's that whole societal view, right? And it's, as somebody who has been victimized more times by women than by men, I'm kind of stuck feeling like, cool, thanks. You know what I mean? Or when people call me a pick-me girl, or just say, I'm just looking for male validation. And it's like, do you think that female abusers only abuse men? Do you think that they don't target children, other women, elders? You know what I mean? And so there is this kind of pattern that's starting to happen where, just like you said, how I always say, treat the issue, not the gender. I find that there's a lot of women walking around carrying other women's trauma on their shoulders. They'll hear, that their friends have been sexually assaulted, and so they walk around and treat men like shit, or they live somebody else's trauma. And we really need to differentiate the monster from like the genitals, because there's a huge difference. But I'm just going to add these other two speakers in.
I think Gerald was next on the mic.
Thank you, my man. To speak on Enoch's first point and a few more points that have come out recently is biologically, men have always been the hunterers. Like, we're the ones going out killing the animals to bring them home, and so there's always that innate violence that is always there for men. When two men are having a conversation, if it ever heats up, there's always the risk of violence or the threat of it. We are seen as aggressive creatures, and for the most part, we understand that, which is why, for the most part, most confrontations don't escalate any further, because it's more of working with personal de-escalation techniques to not get in a fight with this guy, but when it comes to dealing with some women who, when they get aggressive, or like an ex-girlfriend of mine I was with for 7 years, she'd get very confrontational, and I would immediately revert into my standard of de-escalation, but where she doesn't quite have the same understanding, I guess, that a man does for that kind of shit, it can lead to receiving violence in a situation where it's tough. It's tough. Thank you. Thank you for the platform.
Sorry, I'm jumping in before you, but I gotta speak to Gerald, because I feel you. Like, I'm autistic. When I was a kid, I had really a lot of anger issues, and learning how to express my anger and dealing with communication. And that was just put on me as being a young black man. No one knew I was autistic. It was the 90s. That shit wasn't being diagnosed for kids that were reading at a college level. Sheldon Cooper was not a concept at that point. It was all Rain Man. And I learned to de-escalate. I learned to do it with myself. I learned to do it in communication with other men. And that is something I never thought about it before, but that actually has backfired in terms of relationships, because I'm always on that point of de-escalation. And it has ended up with me beings yelled at and having things thrown at me and having girls literally cut their wrists when I have an anxiety attack. I had a girlfriend cut her fucking wrist because I had an anxiety attack about work. Didn't touch her, didn't talk to her, but she pulled that and then said, "This is your fault. You have to take care of
Shit, man. I'm sorry you had to go through something like that.
Yeah, that's
Dude,
really fucked up.
Dude, that's wild. What the hell?
I just wanted to touch on what I think it was Gerald. He said something about, men and women being biologically like bigger than women because they were hunters and gatherers, or hunters, I think he said. That's actually a really big misconception. If you go back through the like the development and what's that called? Does anybody know the word when your body adapts through time to things? What's
Evolution.
it called? Evolution. Thank you. At the beginning of the evolution, we find that the male and female specimens are actually the same size, and where women started to become biologically smaller was around the time where they started to discover humans doing things like burying their young, because that wasn't something we always did. And so that showed not only like evolution in that regard, but also how we felt about each other and, the emotions that we had for each other. And so to me, that speaks very loudly, because as human beings, or Homo sapiens, whatever we were at that point, as we were building our emotional connection to each other, women started becoming smaller and staying home. And that speaks to me like maybe those men had some emotion and some care and said, hey, we got this. You know what I mean? And it's been somehow kind of misconstrued into this, like, women are the emotional ones and men are the strong ones. And it's like, well, I think that men are actually both, and women are both as well, because in a lot of indigenous cultures, like, women are hunters and gatherers as well, always have been. And so I think it's really interesting, when you take that expectation off genders, the difference you can see. Just really lastly, quickly, and as an example, I have a Saint Bernard who's a girl, and based off of the puppy food guide or whatever, she's supposed to get less food because she's a female and she's supposed to be smaller. But I'm feeding her the exact same that a male puppy would be fed, and she's just as healthy and the same size. So it's interesting how these kind of ideologies are pushed into society. And if we break past that barrier, the expectations that can be, like, exceeded.
I wholeheartedly agree with you, Chloe. And, when we look at archaeological records and paleontological records, it is interesting to see that the earliest specimens of hominids did have very similar body types in terms of size and build. And it was when there started to be a divergence, like you said, in cultural patterns, that we also saw a divergence in the physical specimen. And that could be one way or the other, a matter of the emotional development causing there to be a shift, or vice versa. But in terms of there being societies throughout history where there's a reversal in that hunter-gatherer paradigm, 100% correct. Like, there's many indigenous societies, for instance, in Aboriginal society in Australia. The men would be fishermen. They would go out and they would try and catch some fish, but they might not. Or they would go on a long hunt for a kangaroo. But the women would hunt lizards. They would hunt the reptiles. And so women were bringing in the daily food while men were bringing in the big score. And it was a balance. There's never been in an indigenous society an all or nothing for men or women. Everything is always balanced in a healthy and harmonious way. And that's something that has been broken down in industrial and urbanized society. And I want to acknowledge Daniel because you got your hand up, brother.
Yeah, thank you very much. And well, just before what was mentioned, actually, I think you mentioned it, Chloe, regarding how it's called, boundaries. In fact, problem there is especially well with those cases mentioned when the boys were taken advantage of and actually then in fact actually throughout even years learned that well there's someone literally there who can use my body as much as she pleases. If not, then worse will come. So as such, in that regard, then you kind of lose yourself. Literally.
Well, it sounds like you may be speaking from experience. And if you are, I just want to say that I am so sorry.
My grandmother from the age of 3 to 15.
Pardon me?
My grandmother from the age of from 3 till 15.
Oh, I'm really sorry. It happened to me by my older adopted brother from age 4 until 11.
Sorry to hear that.
So I understand what you mean when you say that it takes a part of you. There's a lot of it that's robbed. And, on that aspect, as a girl, it's perfectly okay for me to say, I didn't get to lose my virginity on my own terms. But when a guy says that, in a lot of cases, it's like, okay, and
actually, so that it's so that we don't get into something which wasn't happening. They were actually just touches.
right.
Touches and rubbing alcohol used and basically pain.
Well, I am very sorry that you went through that, and I really admire your ability to be able to speak about it here. And I just want you to know that this is 100% a safe space, and we all support you. And I think, even if there's some people here who may not understand, I think that they're, very willing to listen. And I just want you to know that you, as, somebody who experienced something similar, I want you to know that that person does not own your body. And as hard as that may seem to understand, that is yours. And whenever you're ready, just tell yourself, this is mine and it doesn't belong to anybody anymore. I'm taking control of it now. That's what helped me a lot.
Well, that's the thing. She's not there anymore, and also a lot of years have passed since then. Well, also interesting enough how the psyche works, that a lot of it was actually really buried deep down until I would say even right psychologist came into
Sorry, I didn't hear
so
that
to say into play. And there actually was even another thing, and I have to really acknowledge also other experiences of other guys.
Hey, I couldn't hear that last bit. I'm not sure if it's me that's not working
in stories, but on the other hand, one very common similarity that basically, as men we are called that it is actually one that we are kind of supposed to want it.
Yeah, consent seems to be forgotten when it comes to boys.
PM, I see you got your hand up. What's happening, fam?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that I'm glad I'm not the only one on the spectrum here. So shout out to you, Enoch. That's what I can see from your name right there. That's right. Yeah. Shout out to you, man. So in terms of the topic discussion at hand here, I personally think, the biggest problem overall, probably for many generations, is communication, and that boils down to lack of communication or miscommunication. Like, I'll say, for example, uh, sometimes with some Becky's, as Chloe calls them, sometimes those type of women, I've I've had a change of heart in terms of not generalizing them overall because um, my own mother went through some terrible stuff when she was younger, and now she has a bad perception of men, except for me and my brother. So she loves both of us, all her heart. But with the stuff that's happened to her when she was younger, it's caused her to a lot of trauma in her past, and so now I understand with some of these women now why they might react that way to all men because of some traumatic things that happen. But I also agree at the same time that doesn't excuse them choosing not to get help to heal themselves from the inside. And last thing I'll add is I'm supposedly a decent looking man. I've been told by my mother and a lot of people, and I've had two instances where these women basically either directly said or hinted that they wanted to sleep with me on the first date, and I said no to both of them. And I'm also a virgin, so you can imagine the amount of self control I have on myself right now, and I'm almost 25, so you can
Good
imagine.
for you. That is admirable as fuck. I just want you to know I'm clapping for you. I will not interrupt anymore.
Well, thank you, Chloe. I appreciate that. Um, but yeah, going forward, we just need, and I think communication patterns are growing. We just need to have less miscommunication with each other so that the right message can get to the right people, and then we can, you know, be better humans overall. And that's my spiel. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Just really quickly before, I didn't actually, it's my first time doing this, so I didn't realize when people put their hand up that that's what they were doing. So I'm so sorry if I seemed rude. Um, but just really quickly, um, yeah, I always say when people have strong reactions to other people or a demographic of people, it's usually due to past trauma, and it's okay to change your routines or even feel differently or have a higher guard up after you've had a traumatic experience. But what people need to remember, and we can all do a better job as a society, is like, maybe recognizing that these people, these Beckys as I call them, have these adverse reactions to men because of past experiences, and acknowledging that for them, but then encouraging them to come into the realm of, please understand that this is not like, this is an issue of like a person, a personality, like an asshole, not people with penises, you know yeah, that's my spiel.
Amen on all counts. And also, I want to just take a moment to acknowledge Daniel, because I did not acknowledge you after you spoke, and I'm sorry for that, brother. You know, when we're looking at abuse in all forms, especially early childhood abuse, that stays with you a long time. And it is an immense burden, but a powerful journey to be able to find a way to free yourself of the shadows and the shackles of the people that abused you and find your strength and your power in your own right. And that can happen at any age. It doesn't matter how long it's been, it doesn't matter how long the person's been dead and gone. The power is in your hands. And learning that is one of the most important steps that anyone can take in healing from abuse, whether they're male or female. And just much love, brother, much support. And, definitely PM in terms of what you were saying. It is very difficult to be a young man. I'm 35 now, and it's very difficult when you're in your 20s to turn something down, especially if you're on the spectrum, because then you're wondering even more. Like the process of figuring something out is even harder. So I really need to applaud you and give you your flowers and kudos, because that discipline and that strength at this point is going to help you find a partner that will love you, that will be able to honor you and see you for who you are, and give you the support you need in return for the support that you naturally are going to give them. So
I
keep
agree,
your head
man.
high,
Yeah,
brother.
yeah, exactly. And in terms of those, as I mentioned, those two women I turned down, I mainly did it because I did not want to be labeled accused of being a rapist later. I was thinking ahead of time. I was thinking long terms, like, okay, if I say yes to these Beckys now to sex on the first date, they're gonna turn it against me. I just feel it. So, yeah, exactly. I want a partner who's, got loyalty, honesty, and, trust. I don't think that's hard to ask. And it's just, if they can't give that to me, then I'm moving on to the next one.
The
They'll give
no
that to
dick.
me. No
No
dick.
dick.
No dick. Exactly, Chloe. Exactly.
and and a safety precaution to protect your dick. It is very easy with a smartphone to just say, look, I need a video where you're saying you consent to having sex with me. That's all. I just need you to record this video real quick and say that you consent on this date to having sex with me. And
You
I
then
know,
we're good.
hear
there was
what
a
you're
video that
saying, but it doesn't
there's a.
work
Oh,
because
sorry.
consent can be withdrawn at any point.
Oh yeah,
This is
that
true.
that 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 can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I've thought about that because I was like, what if I cultivated like an app or something where it's like everybody is kept safe, her, him, but because consent can be withdrawn at tumbling baby, because with consent can be withdrawn at any point. She could say yes on camera and then 5 minutes later feel uncomfortable. You not respect that, not that you would, but you being said person in the situation, and then you've got on camera that she said yes, and then here she's been traumatized and not validated. So that's, I've thought about that though.
That is true. And that also works in the reverse, because if someone got me like that and then I said, you know what? I'm really not feeling this 5 minutes in. I wouldn't want them being like, nope, you consented. It's on camera. You've got to fuck me now.
Fight
Like,
the issue, not the gender.
I think Board has had his hands up for a while, him or her, sorry. Board, do you
No,
want
it's completely okay. I did have a question, Chloe, real quick. Would you mind if I ran a quick experiment?
is it appropriate?
Yes. Yes, yes,
Okay, then
yes.
yes.
I just, out of a show of hands in this little group that we have, how many people here have been told be a man? Like,
I think
man up,
I
do
think
the thing.
everybody's hand should go up.
Aren't you supposed
Right.
to act like a
Yeah, I'm
man?
surprised.
And see, that's the thing. That was my little experiment. Everyone's been told that, whether it be parents or relationship partners. And I feel like that might be the most detrimental phrase that we have in today's society is like, man up, do the thing. Your feelings aren't valid. Just keep going. No matter what, be a man.
Yeah, that phrase
yeah,
is subjective nowadays.
Well, yeah, because what does it even mean to be a man? I think I was thinking about this either last night or this morning while I was doing laundry, actually, that exact phrase, man up. It was last night because I was watching Dr. Phil and he said man up to somebody. And I said, thinking to myself, I was like, what does that mean? Because, like as a woman, when I hear the term man up, from my perspective, it's said to a man at a time where he's being either like encouraged or told to do the right thing. So when people say like man up, you know, my brain, I'm always like double standarding things. I'm like, what's the inverse of that? And it's like, well, do what's woman up? Does that mean, you know, is there such, because nobody's ever told me to woman up. So does that mean that, you know, that men are supposed to like always have the answers, always, you know, just know what they're doing? And like the answer is yes, that's exactly the expectation. But the inverse of that is that, you know, women are kind of infantilized and also not recognized when they do, you know, man up, so to speak, whatever the fuck that means. I don't even, what does that mean to you guys? That's one thing I'd be really interested as a woman to hear. What does man up mean to you when somebody says that to you?
Well, and see, growing up, hearing that from my family, it was generally a way to invalidate how you felt about a certain situation. It's man up. Doesn't really matter. Put your feelings aside. You're fine. Keep going. And as Enoch said, I believe, or I don't remember who said that it is subjective, you are correct. It is subjective. But the problem is when it comes to a societal standard, it means, well, at least in my experience, means your feelings don't really matter. You just got to keep going. Doesn't matter what happened, who did what, just keep moving forward. And that's my piece.
That's very sad.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, I could accept the perspective of man up in terms of not giving up on life, generally speaking. But when it comes to when a man is feeling down on his luck or if he's, something bad happened to him in his life, in my opinion, it's probably not the best time to use that phrase. It's because you can't keep things bottled up. Because if you keep things bottled up, then you release your emotions on the wrong person, probably. And there's my spiel on that.
So
And where
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say I completely agree with you on that, but being raised in the 90s as a latchkey kid, it was man up, deal with it. It doesn't really matter how you feel, it just matters what you do. So as long as you don't lose your shit on people, you're fine. It doesn't matter what you think, doesn't matter what you feel. I was growing up with parents who are like, yeah, you have severe depression, but nothing's wrong with you. You don't need medication. You're fine. You'll be fine. It's fine.
Man up to
So
me basically means to just white knuckle it through life, no matter how you're feeling, no matter how exhausted you might be, no matter how much those back to back to back shifts are killing you. Just white knuckle it. You have to keep going.
exactly. And like I was asking, just how many people have had that used against them by said friends or family or romantic interests being like, just man up, you're fine. And it's like, well, geez, okay, I guess what I feel or think doesn't matter as long as I'm providing something for you.
And at the end of that, it just makes you feel expendable.
Yeah, I made a video on this. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. This girl made this video, and she was like, "Remember when men used to go to war, and now they buy bubblegum flavored vape juice or something?" And I'm like, I made a video, and I was like, "Isn't it funny how men are more valued by sacrificing their mental health, their position at home and in their community, their lives, than just being themselves and be happy, like buying bubblegum flavored vape juice? Like, literally, who cares? It's the saddest thing in the world to me. I could never, you know, oh, yes, you're so happy. I have a lot on my plate, right? Like, I work from home, I do this, I provide for my family. I'm the financial provider. I'm a clean freak, so I'm always cleaning. And I am, as a woman, I'm allowed to have a bad day. I couldn't imagine well, I kind of grew up like that, so I can't imagine, but not to the fullest extent. I can't understand what it's like to just not be allowed to have a bad day. And if you are, you need to express that in anger. But if you express that in anger, you're abusive. So, like, it's, man, like, no wonder the suicide rate is so high, honestly.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to matter what you do. Man up for most guys means, well, just deal with your emotions, you're fine. bottle it up. You'll be okay. You know, go punch a tree. You're good.
Also, feelings are not gender specific. Feelings are and emotions are human nature. Man, female, they, them, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
Indeed,
it's part of being a human. Even
indeed.
flowers have emotions.
All things
Well,
are connected. All things have emotions. And I know Daniel is probably having some emotions because he's had his hand up for like, I don't know, 7-10 minutes.
oh,
And
my
I just want
bad.
to holla at my man and see what you're feeling.
Sorry, it's more like that. I just don't want to disturb and interrupt. So hence why, yeah, just given a notice that there's something that definitely is up. Would be willing to mention or to put into the circle. Well, in regards to the terms of to man up. I can't. I actually even lost count how many times I have heard that. Was from family, my father, my mother, my siblings, even from my wife. Well, she's not here yet, but still. Even psychologists. There it actually hurt also the most, and well, maybe not that much used in America, like the USA and Canada, but and well, definitely not in Europe. That's definite. Where actually
Yeah,
I come
for
from,
sure. Where are you from?
where I come from. But Slovakia.
Oh, okay, okay. I'm from Romania, so I have a bit of an understanding of the difference. And men are that, there's so much of it in my culture, like just being Rumney. There's so much toxic. I don't like the word toxic masculinity because I think it's just misandry, and masculinity is not toxic, but there's a lot of toxic expectations of what it means to be a man and a woman in our culture, like really bad, to the point where like gypsy women, we're supposed to have long hair, but we're not supposed to put our hair up in a ponytail in front of men because our hair is our strength, and there's no fucking way that we're going to be vulnerable and weak in front of men. It's like what? Like you know what I mean? So
Yeah, I
it's
do.
very interesting.
And on that, well, kind of almost the same regard, not really in regards to hair, but actually to regards to clothing. Well, you see, my wife, she's from New Zealand. And as such, when I was there, I learned a bit of their culture, and I found it actually quite interesting, and I have to admit, comfortable. The clothing that Samoans are wearing. Maybe you have heard of it, the term of lava lava?
Yes.
Yeah. After the surgery, which actually, in fact, happened lately, but as a consequence of that abuse that I went through. So, in fact, I have to admit, I just can't. As for now, I can't wear pants, no matter what. I just can't. It's just painful. So I started wearing that. My wife actually dearly appreciated it because, of course, it's from her, where she comes from, and that she came living with me. So, I kind of brought a bit of culture here to Slovakia, where she was, like with us when she has flown with me here to live here. But geez, did I get abused because of that? Because I'm wearing it. Even my psychologist, she was like, are you now a transgender or what? I was like, pardon? No. In certain parts, that's a completely normal unisex clothing.
Daniel, I don't mean to cut you off, brother, but I feel you. I don't feel the pain of having to wear a different kind of clothing because of surgery, but just if you have ever, if a therapist ever comes at you again like that, point out the Sumerians wore robes. All
No
Chinese
kidding.
wear, all like Asian cultures wore robes. Greeks,
Yeah, true.
Romans, togas, the Scottish, kilts. Like men
Kilts
like
are
to
comfortable.
dangle, okay? There's nothing wrong with dangling. It's a nice breeze.
Well, that's the thing. Even then, later the urologist told me, like, yeah, well, actually, all power to you, especially in the culture where we are. But health-wise, I applaud you. You are doing actually something amazing for your parts down there.
Yeah,
So,
it sounds like a breeze, no pun intended.
well, yeah, but in fact, then, of course, my family then especially started asking, like, what the heck is happening? And it was actually then, that was the last time when they told me, like, yeah, man up, just take it as it is and deal with it. And even don't embarrass us came out.
That's so
with what I'm wearing.
That's so invalidating.
So
And see, that was my entire point.
Who's really being more of the man here? That's my question. Who's being more courageous? Who's being more honorable to themselves? Who is being more authentic to their own needs and standing up for their own autonomy, for their body, for their sovereignty?
Yes.
You're the one who's manning up right now. And they're the ones who, quite frankly, are trying to follow all of the bullshit standards. Like, you're manning up big, man.
A million times, yes.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, there's nothing, I mean, again, I'm a woman, so I can't speak to what is manly or what makes somebody a man, but, you know, as a woman who is attracted to men, there is nothing more attractive than a man who is authentic rather than one who, you know, like listens to the rest of society. And not to say that, you know, the ones who don't listen aren't, you know, any less admirable. It's very hard to stand up against literally an entire society and say, go fuck yourself. Like, that's very hard to do.
Yeah, true.
Very hard. But yeah, so I think that this has been up for 1 hour already. I think I'm going to close the Twitter space. Does anybody have any last thoughts before we go? Anybody who didn't get a chance to speak?
Simon's had his hand up for a good minute.
Yeah, Simon.
Thank you very much. Just to clarify, yes, women can't get done for rape in the UK, as that's where I live. Yes, I've heard man up all my life, as I was born in the 70s. Even to this day, my dad still tells me to man up. It's just one of those things. It's put your emotions aside, shut up whinging, get on with life. Carry on, get your head down, carry on, as he would put it. But yeah, to go back to the being men, do you know if you're being abused? Yes, somebody like me, I'm not a very confident person, never have been, not really. I've been there, seen it, done it, got t-shirts, been in the army, done all that. I'm still not a very confident man when it comes to talking to women, never have been. But yeah, I know what it's like being abused off my partner I was with for 15 years. And I knew I was being abused, but as the saying still goes, man up. So I just put up with it and just carried on going. I won't get into details of everything, but yeah, that's my 10 pence on it. I hope everybody appreciates what I've said. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Definitely appreciate your insight.
100%, Simon. You know, I appreciate you being here, sharing your vulnerability. You know, I've known a lot of people from the UK. I've known many regional accents, and I know the energy that comes with being a man in different regions. So I know that even stepping up and speaking is one of those things that is not an easy thing where you're from and where you've been raised. So I honor your vulnerability and your strength for stepping up. And I want to thank you, Chloe, for hosting this space, for coming out. I know you said it's your first time hosting a Twitter space. It was a joy, a pleasure, an honor to be here with you. And
Agreed.
I want to invite you. I sent you a DM, but I want to invite you and really anyone who needs to have some space to just talk about feelings. There's a space I normally join in on every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's a Mental Health Mondays space. The host is a young woman in Miami. Co-host is a older woman from I don't know where, but they're both wonderful people. It's a safe space. It's a very loving and supportive space, and I think that it's just a great place to continue conversations about healing and growth. So
I
thank
would
you,
definitely be
everyone,
interested in joining.
and we'd love to have you there.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Speaking of spaces, Chloe, are we going to be able to view the recording of this space later on? How long is it going to be up?
Yes, I'm going to post it. I don't know how to transition it, but I will transition it to my podcast and my YouTube, as long as everybody here is okay with it. I know you guys shared some pretty personal stuff, so if any of you want your names to be blocked out or have a voice changer over your voice, or if you guys would just feel comfortable if I didn't post it at all, please let me know.
I'm good here. Anybody else?
Speak
All
now,
good.
forever
I'm good
hold your
also.
peace.
I'm fine with it.
If my truth helps other people, other men find the strength to speak their truth, then let it be out there.
Same here.
I have no objections.
Preach.
Well, thank you to everybody. And that was actually going to be a part of my ending thought is every one of you here who shared your story and, came forward being vulnerable. It means so much I know so many people who probably listen today or will listen in the future. Because, as you guys know, vulnerability can be very difficult, and leading by example is the best way to affect that change. So I just wanted to really, really thank you guys, and I really honor and respect every single one of you. And another final closing thought is if anybody is uncertain, just because this one was about abuse, I just want to touch very quickly on what abuse can look like in a relationship, because sometimes not a lot of guys know. So it is abuse if you constantly find yourself walking on eggshells around her. That is a very good indication that something is wrong. So if that sticks out to you, then keep listening. If she is slapping, kicking, or spitting at you, if she's throwing things at you, if she's slamming doors, any loud types of aggression is abuse. And number one, it is a huge red flag for an indication of further abuse. And men are not, they're not exempt from being at risk of being killed by their partners. And especially if you're fleeing a domestic relationship from a woman, you are at a very, very high risk of being stalked, of having property damage done to you, and potential violence. So again, kicking, slapping, name calling, if you find yourself always having just a low confidence, you're always wondering, like, what did I do wrong? Is it me? It's probably not you if every single time it's you, if you understand what I mean there. If you guys have any more questions as well, I will be doing a longer video on this today on some red flags of abuse that may not, quite be known to people. I'm learning new things every day myself. So yeah, thank you everybody who joined and listened. And I'm really excited to do this again. I'm not sure when I'm going to do it again, maybe on Friday or Wednesday. But yeah, I'm going to close it up for now. And thank you to everybody. Remember, give these Beckys no dick.
No dick.
No dick.